Utilizing information from sources is a K-12 writing skill, and most teachers spend ample time helping students identify a credible source before they begin their research, and also in teaching students how to cite sources after they wrote the research. But we can't assume that they have strong organizational skills for the middle of that process. Students don't inherently know how to track what information came from which source. This isn't a big deal when there's only one source that we're pulling the information from. And it's not a big deal if the teacher's always providing the sources. But when students begin to conduct their own research, identify their own sources, take notes independently, then this process becomes vital. So we want to begin teaching this in the primary grades, and you can do it with an all-class anchor chart. Before the lesson, identify 3 or 4 nonfiction picture books that you want to read, all on a single topic. Photocopy the covers to each of those picture books. Then, after reading aloud the first text, tape the photocopied cover of that first book to the anchor chart. With the text referenced by that photocopied cover, begin to recall the facts and information and list it to the side. Then, read the second text. Place its photocopied cover and key information adjacent to it. Continue this process over the multiple days it will take you to read all of the text. And each time you bring the kids back to the anchor chart, remind them the skill that you're working on. Remind them that authors need to be conscious of where they got their information. So we're going to create this really organized chart. Show them visually how the information is adjacent to its source. The source is the picture book cover, and the information from the source is the listed details to the right. You might actually draw lines in or use different colored markers for each source. This will help the students differentiate the information. As simple as this process is, it requires explicit instruction because these primary students become intermediate and secondary students who are just collecting notes and facts and quotes and information, and they don't know where they got all of this knowledge. So in the upper grades, follow the same simple T-chart approach, although you'll probably provide the students an independent sheet to work from. Within your lesson, while noting the facts, the quotes, the data, and the details, pulling from research, be sure to emphasize which text provided us all that information. Again, they're not going to collect all of this information in one sitting. It's something they're going to go back to repeatedly for several days. So we can't expect that they're going to just remember the source of the information. That's why we teach them to maintain an organized list. Now, I recognize there's a lot of software and programs and websites that will help students organize all of this. But I want them to understand the skill. I want them to understand the foundations of this organizational concept. So start with paper and pencil. And once students have mastered tracking information from sources, then introduce them to the different technology sources that can be helpful.